Everyday Business Solutions, the podcast that offers you the right perspective on achieving success. We interview business professionals from all over to bring our listeners the right solutions to all their questions. Season 1 is about change management and enabling you to both face and create change in all aspects of your company. We're talking management, sales, service, HR, and more. Let's jump straight into the episode. Hello and welcome to Everyday Business Solutions. Today we're meeting with Rebekah Saltzman, and then my name is Haley Morris. As you know, I'm your podcast coordinator and host. So I'm going to start off by just having Rebekah introduce you, but before that, I'll say what we're going to talk about today has to do with changing your processes, changing your process strategy, and your approach to what you're doing internally at your company. So Rebekah, if you'll go ahead and talk about yourself a little bit.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebekah. First of all, thanks, Hallie, so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. I am a personal organization expert, and the name of my company is called Balagan Be Gone. Balagan is the Hebrew word for chaos, so it's like chaos be gone, right? So I started out helping people declutter in their homes, and I've slowly started shifting into helping small businesses get started and organize their processes and streamline what they do so that they are lean, mean business machines. And basically, what I love to help people do is set up early stage startup companies. They don't have to be like tech startups or whatever. They could just be early small business startups. And I help people like implement all the stages of their business, and I hold their hand throughout the process. So I'm not just being your cheerleader, yay, you're doing a great job, right? I'm actually helping people set up what they do and give them like an order through my 10-week coaching practice, how to start out your business so that you are already lean when you are starting out and you're not making a lot of mistakes and repeating processes over and over and over again, because that's just a time suck and it's a waste of money and it's just a waste of resources, and it's just, something that I found that most businesses can't do on their own. So that's why I started my coaching practice.
All right. So when you're getting people started up and when you're doing all of this, there's obviously going to be maybe some areas that you focus on first. So what do you look at first when it comes to just setting up those initial processes and making sure that a business is off on the right foot, the way to operating in a lean model?
Okay, so the first thing we look at is, what is the goal? So if your goal is to support other businesses, let's say, then we're trying to make packages that are reasonable for what your clients will want. We look for the best packages to make. We look for how you can best interact with those customers and clients, and how you can deal with follow-up sort of situations so that you are not spending all of your time and resources figuring out how to follow up with people. It's just sort of your process. They go into your pipeline, and then you're managing them throughout the process because you already have these pre-set up templates on how to manage the process. So for example, I will sit there and we will outline together exactly what stage everything happens at. What email gets set out at stage 1? What do you have to do at stage 1? What does your client have to do at stage 1? What happens at stage 2? What happens at stage 3, etc. And most people don't really understand how to outline that, and they're just sort of winging it. But when you actually set out these processes and streamline what happens and worry about what the images look like when, this certain email goes out or something like that, it makes a big difference. If you do it one time and then forget about it, you're pretty much set. You don't have to revisit it over and over and over again every single time. You create like one proposal and you edit it accordingly for the client at hand, and then you can go ahead and reuse that same proposal over and over again. At some point, you will need to reevaluate your processes and just make sure that they're still working for you. But for the most part, I find that for the startup, you can get 6 months to a year before you really need to do a solid reevaluation. In the beginning, you might have to tweak a little bit, but for the most part, like I said, you can get through for a while without having to really reevaluate. And once you start to grow, then you have to change. But initially, it's these initial templates creating rules in your email, just creating email signatures. I mean, we waste so much time typing, have a great day, Rebekah, like 50 times a day in all of our emails. It's such a waste of time. Having a signature saves us time. Having email templates saves us time. Having calendar requests saves us time. And all these things seem small, but they add up throughout the day. And overall, it makes our life easier, and it frees us up to focus on tasks that are more important for us to be doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I would say, kind of going off that, is because there's a lot of businesses that exist that they kind of have a process and they don't want to change it because, well, the team knows it. What is the downside to a process where some of these activities that you could automate or you could just make more efficient and you don't? What are the downsides to that? What happens to a business that decides not to change because it works?
Okay, so I'm going to give an example, which I think a lot of people can resonate with. I have 3 kids. About five years ago, when my kids started in the first grade, the principal said to me, "Oh, I had this chance to put smart boards in all of the classrooms, but I just decided that I'm not going to do it because it's not really worth it. All the teachers are going to have to learn. The good teachers are going to get frustrated and they're going to be flustered and they're not going to understand it. And the bad teachers, it's not going to make them any better, really." And like, first of all, I thought he was greatly underestimating the teachers, but fast forward 5 years, could you imagine if he would have installed these smart boards 5 years ago in 2020, when we're having a global pandemic? All the teachers could have gone to school, stood in their classroom, and taught all the kids, virtually, which would have been a much better model for all these children who now have to learn online. And the teachers would be isolated in their own classroom, so that would be okay for them. But then it would be so much, the quality of learning would have been so much better for these kids, because they would have all been used to the smart board. The teachers would have been used to the smart board. The kids would have been used to the smart board. And it would have been easier for them to adapt to this new online, system that we're in right now. I don't even know what we're in.
Chaos.
But it would have been so much easier for everybody to be adaptive and nimble. And so, yes, on the front side, there would have been a learning curve, and it might have even taken what seems like an unreasonable amount of time. But later on, having these skills would have made it so much easier. I mean, who could have predicted a global pandemic? But I feel like the world was sort of heading towards online learning models anyways. So obviously we just expedited it a little bit right now, but this would have, I guess, lowered the curve for teachers to be dealing with Zoom a lot earlier.
Mm-hmm. No, I told somebody something very similar. I said, it's crazy because I think all of these changes we're seeing now because of 2020 were going to happen anyway. But 2020 came along and said, not just do we have a pandemic, but we have all this other stuff that's going on. And it just sped it up. It said, everything that's going to take you years to adapt to, I need you to do that in months.
Right now, fast forward.
if not quicker. More businesses are switching to hybrid models or will be as we overcome this hurdle of the pandemic. We'll be switching to hybrid models where employees will work remote or in place. Some are switching to fully remote, and then some are trying to gravitate back, but are seeing it's not as simple. Like, we've seen increased productivity with all of our workplace remote. So now we have a couple people trickling back in. Obviously, I had to come back because I had a studio to set up and get ready. And I needed a little more quiet than what a 6-year-old typically allows. Yeah.
Did you hear my dog barking just a minute ago?
Oh yeah, I'm very fortunate my dog doesn't bark a lot for whatever reason. Not very often. But I have a puppy who requires constant attention. She's 4 years old and knows what she wants. So yeah, of course, a bunch of people can probably relate. Maybe they don't have an isolated work environment at home. So either obtaining one of those, like working towards it, or coming back to an office might be beneficial. But more people are finding that, yes, after they overcome, again, that learning curve
right.
of adapting to this new situation, adapting to the new way to handle things, that they actually preferred working at home. So that's one change that just kind of sped up. Obviously, like the heavier reliance on online networking and online communication has also increased exponentially too. I think Zoom was a little overwhelmed there for a bit with all the
Yeah,
influx.
that's
It seemed
true.
like I couldn't get a quality call all the way through for anything, but now
Yeah.
it's smoothed back out, or at least I think so.
Yeah,
Um,
for
but yeah,
sure.
no. So I guess kind of going off of that, with all of the things like changing to adapt to a new system or a new process to increase your efficiency, really focus on the work that matters to you. There is that learning curve that you mentioned. So what do you have to say to people who say, well, the learning curve is too great, like the teachers, they're too afraid, or the not the teachers but the administration for the teachers, it's like the learning curve's too great, we don't want to do it, versus like perhaps like long-term benefits and stuff. What do you have to say to that?
So I think, usually the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term struggles. And I think about it from like the perspective of, if you give your team the tools that they need to work smarter and not harder, it's going to be easier for them in the long run. They'll like their jobs more. There'll be a greater satisfaction with the work that they do, and they'll be more loyal to you. Like when you invest in your team and you show them that you're invested in them, they want to stay with you. And it's not going to be only about the money, because maybe someone will offer them $5,000 more a year or even $10,000 more a year. But if they feel like you are always supporting them and you are giving them as much as you can, like they're gonna stay with you. They're gonna want to be with you because they're gonna appreciate having a good boss and being part of a good team. So when you invest in your employees and you take the time to say, listen, what you learn is important to me. There might be a struggle in the beginning, but tell me where I can help you to learn this. Like, do you need me to get you coaching from the company? Do you need to learn X, Y, and Z in order to do ABC? Tell me where you need to be invested in, and I will help you. I think that the payoff in the long run is much, much greater. I think it
Mm,
also says to your team, like, this is what I value. Like, I value you and I want you to be a superstar. And so I'm going to give you the tools to be a superstar and let your superstardomness come out. Because when a boss or a company can do that for their team, I think it makes a huge difference in the quality of work that people show up and what they're willing to do for the company. So if they can, if you as an employer or a boss, if you can empower your team in that way and make them feel like superstars, I think that the short-term headache is worth it if in the long term the payout is just going to be exponential.
mhm. Yeah, and it's people typically think of enhancing that work culture just through like a reward system or things like that, but enhancing a work culture, rewarding employees, comes back to how you equip them too.
Right.
Are
A
you equipping
hundred
them for
percent.
success? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, you can have your employees. We were talking earlier. You referred to it as like the admin side of it. That takes up
Yeah.
60+% of their workday, but they're a sales rep, um, or their customer service rep. They're not getting to focus on what you hired them for. At the end of the day, that leads to job dissatisfaction. So.
Right. If you are going to give your team a tool that can focus them on what their actual job is instead of the admin side of their job, you're going to be better off because they'll be happier, but also you don't have to hire somebody else to do it. So like, let's say you're investing in a tool that's going to make it faster for them to lead people through the sales funnel. If you're going to do that, yeah, okay, there's going to be a learning curve for that. But what you're doing is you're freeing up their time in the long run so that they can focus on what their actual job is. And that's huge. And when you're looking at your bottom line, By the way, it's not so cheap to hire another person. If you can make the person you have do a better job more efficiently, they're going to feel better about themselves. They're going to feel better about how they do their job. You're going to be happier with their performance. And, you're going to get an employee who is much better at their job.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this also this mindset to sometimes, like, if you got a team that's struggling to bring in sales or respond to customer calls or whatever their job might be, it might not be the team. It might be that they're downloading with like all this stuff that they have to do that's not necessarily necessary. And that like kind of leads us into something else we talked about earlier, which was outsourcing some of these
Yeah.
tasks and how exactly you're outsourcing the kind of menial labor that's unnecessary for your sales team, your support team, your marketing team, whatever team it might be. So,
Right. So I think, well, something that you said to me was outsourcing sort of sometimes has this like negative connotation where, okay, I'm taking away American jobs and I'm sending them overseas, but outsourcing doesn't have to be international. I think that there is an important formula you need to consider when you decide who should be doing what job or what role in your companies. So let's take the example of the home for just a minute, because I think it's a really easy example to look at. If you make $300 an hour and it's going to take you 3 or 4 hours to clean your house, it's not worth it to do it yourself, because somebody else can do it the same or better than you can for less money. And if you can focus that time on either your work or something else that's actually important to you, then it's worth it to outsource that job. So I think that what you need to consider is this: if someone can do the job equal or better than you can, and if it's not something you enjoy anyways, then it's worth it to hire somebody to do that. For example, in my business, I don't really enjoy doing the writing of my social media so much, but I don't mind doing the graphics. So my background's in design. I do a lot of my own graphics, and I let my assistant do a lot of the writing for me, because for me, it's worth it to have her do it for what it costs so that I can focus on actually meeting with clients or doing podcast interviews or my own podcast, things that I can't outsource to somebody else. And it makes sense for me to do them because either I enjoy it or it's something that nobody else can do. And I think that that's really the important aspect. If nobody else can do it, if it's something you have to do, then you have to do it. But if it's something somebody else can do, it's really important to let it go to somebody else. And this doesn't have to be necessarily a person. It can also be some sort of automated system, like the systems that you guys offer. And I think that where you can make yourself more lean and use systems or outsource to people, it does actually make life easier. And I don't necessarily have to outsource to another company, let's say. So if you have inside your company a need for someone to handle social media, you don't necessarily have to outsource that to an outside company, but maybe that means outsourcing to a social media specialist within your company. So the definition of outsourcing in my mind is a little bit fluid, because it doesn't need to be rigid. It doesn't need to be I'm sending the jobs overseas. It's I don't have to do this job myself. I can pay somebody. And actually that's great for the economy too.
yeah, it's sharing the business aspect of it,
Yeah.
which is great. And it's not like, oh my gosh, these jobs or these tasks that you're outsourcing are terrible. It just means you brought somebody on for a particular job and you're paying them a certain amount of money for that job. And at the end of the day, if they're doing something else, it's not taken into your equation more often than not. It's just
Right.
so you're actually getting you're unequally paying for different tasks. So it's like you said, when you outsource, when you share these tasks with somebody else, you share that business with somebody else, you give them the opportunity to make money from it, but you also
Right.
increase your efficiency and your specialization, which
Exactly.
it
Because there's no reason to waste your time on doing something you're not good at. So if
mhm,
you want to like DIY your website, okay, go ahead and DIY your website. But here's the thing. Again, if you make $300 an hour, if you DIY it, it's probably going to take you 10 hours to do. If you would have just hired a pro, they would have done it in 3 or 4, let's say
mhm,
3 or 4. It might have cost the same amount, but it would have saved you so much aggravation that it's like, well, why would you want to aggravate yourself for 10 hours? And then, by the
mhm,
way, once you get aggravated for 10 hours, it like runs into every other aspect of your business and you're like aggravated for like 3 days, right? And
mhm.
like and
Yeah.
everybody else kind of suffers because you just didn't want to outsource that job and spend a little money on it. Now, sometimes we don't have the money to spend and we have to DIY certain things, but this is where I'm talking about prioritization of what you can outsource and what you can't outsource.
Mhm,
And you have to figure out what is going to be good enough if you do it and what isn't, and where you're going to get aggravated. Because honestly, again, the aggravation can set you back so much that it's like, it's really not worth it.
mhm. And it's so you're not only feeding yourself negative energy and unnecessary headache, but you're taking away from what you could be doing instead. And that could be work,
Exactly.
or it could be saying, I've got this staff of people and I need this much work done to reach this goal. And realizing that when you overwork people, you do drop their efficiency and actually do a lot less in a greater amount of time. That you could actually be like, oh, I only need my staff 8 hours versus 9 or 10 hours each day that they come in. And you can cut back on somebody's hours, give them more family time, give yourself more family time, or just when you're at work, because you're actually getting your job done, it doesn't feel as stressful or as crunched. You relax that atmosphere in the office, and that thing that everybody's striving for right now is that work culture. That's the big trend, or at least it
Yeah.
was before COVID hit and changed the idea of the workplace completely. But work culture has been on the uptick within HR and within work as well. Like people go, it's one of their top priorities when seeking a new job. It's one of their top priorities when building a business. Part of that is making sure that you have the processes in place to support your team so that they're relaxed enough to actually benefit that work culture and drive up the productivity level.
Right. And productivity is a huge, huge thing. I mean, I think there's this, I think I read in the Harvard Business Review, like people are only productive for like this idea of the 8 hour workday is not really like an efficient
Mm-hmm.
workday, really. And like most people are only actually getting 4 hours of work done every day anyways, or something like much smaller than what we're actually at work for. And that's because we get distracted
Mm-hmm.
and we can't bounce back easily from distraction. And so if you can make the process more lean for your employees or for yourself, if it can just be a simplified process where there's no way to fall off and get to like be distracted, it's gonna boost your productivity also, because it means that less things will be stopped in process. And I think that's where a lot of people like fall down the rabbit hole. So like I'm writing an email to you and the phone rings and it takes me a couple of minutes to remember that I have to get back to your email, because maybe before I get back to right back into it, 6 other emails came up in the meantime and I am just slogging through those to get back. So if the processes of interacting with other people takes less time, it's one of those things where, hello, the phone rings. Okay, just give me 1 second, blah, blah, blah. I can, finish what I'm doing and then address the person on the phone. And that makes a big difference because they're not interrupting their workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And that improves productivity, and it just makes everybody feel more productive and better about the job they're doing, and it makes things less likely to fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. We, as you know, we have the CRM, we have an auto dialer, which do a lot of the things you just touched on. So the auto dialer takes out like the dialing and stuff of that task. But it's this idea of putting the human aspect back in, because what you're doing is you're taking out all those things that kind of dampen your actual customer interaction. Like it decreases time you spend as a team, the time you spend with your customer. So now
Right.
if they're not having to waste all that time and they're not looking for excuses to be distracted, like our auto dialer, it just goes right into the next call unless you pause it. So, and it's not bad because you're not dealing with the ringing, the dialing, the things like that. You're
Right.
actually talking to people when they pick up. And if they don't pick up, you can, quickly move on. And you don't have to dwell on it, sort of thing. But it's also
Right.
the same with, yeah, if you adopt a CRM system, it's the same thing. It's easy. You have those templates, you have the automation that's doing something for you. And what we call the increased sales memory, or just the increased customer memory, where the system helps you by putting some of that in there that you can scroll back. And it's not
Right.
like you actively forgot. It's like you've a million things you're doing because you're a working human being. So I would definitely agree.
It just goes speaks to that, the fact that we discussed earlier, which was you don't have to grow your business by constantly looking for new customers.
Mm-hmm.
If you can better focus on the customers you have, you can upsell those customers more if you're having a better customer relationship, and if you are able to spend more individual time with your customers. So having fewer customers is, or having a small amount of customers isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long
Mm-hmm.
if you can meet their needs and constantly be selling to them, then that's what's the difference if you have 1,000 customers or 100 customers, because you could in some ways sell a lot, almost the same amount to both customers, to both numbers of customers, if you are focusing on your customers and what you can get them to buy from you. And focusing on the relationship, I think, is the most important thing, because everybody wants to feel like the person they are working with, like they're the only one. And no one wants to feel like someone else is more important than them. And I love when I'm dealing with a service provider and they're like, and I feel like I'm the only one, and I know that other people feel that way. And I think that is one of the most important things you can do for your business, is make each and every one of your customers feel like they are the only customer. And like that is going to be what keeps your customers coming back and spending more money.
Yeah. Well, and two, if you have something, because sometimes it's the returning customer, sometimes it's a subscription based thing. So now we have a
Right.
lot of subscription based boxes or subscription based services, like the software as a service is very popular. That if you're constantly trying to acquire new customers and that is your only means of revenue, then you're constantly have sales reps that they're only getting so many successful sales out of how many people they're calling. Like it's different for each team, of course.
Right.
But then if you have a returning customer, that's a steady set of revenue that you can rely on, a relationship. And usually they do your marketing for you if they really like you. So
Yeah. That's
it's
so true.
yeah.
So true.
Like
Yeah.
when I did podcasting, for example, I reached out to like, well, I did all my research and I did all my, things. And it was like, okay, how do you market a podcast? And then it was, well, how do people find podcasts? They hear about them from friends, from family, or sometimes they pop up on a list because a bunch of other people have listened to. We rely on that opinion of others who've already done the listening for us to find that initial, and then we decide if we like it. But that's the marketing trick nowadays, not just with podcasts though, with everything, with software, with other services, with different products. Oh, how did you hear about us? Well, I actually heard about you from my friend
Right.
Julie or whatever.
Right.
Julie told me about it and she heard from Kate and Kate heard from so and so, and like now I'm here. And oh no, you guys are pretty cool, you guys are nice to me, and you're here when
Right.
I need you. And yeah, I'm gonna tell Brandon and Carter over there, whoever,
Right. Right.
you're gonna tell your friends and you're gonna keep coming back. And then suddenly like your sales team can focus on going out to get leads, and just being able to, when somebody comes into them, they're able to interact with that person, engage that person, and they're excited because, hey, this person was interested in us and we did
Right.
our job.
Exactly.
There's so much,
Exactly.
it's like a compounding effect. Like everything just
Right.
builds.
And the word of mouth is searchable now because people ask a question, today in a Facebook group, who's great at XYZ? Who's the best personal organizer? Someone might say me. In 6 months, someone else is searching that group for the same question, and I come up again without anybody having to do anything, but it
Mm-hmm.
keeps coming up. And like, so that's the thing. These things are sort of like living on the internet, and you want them to be good about you because
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
want people to find the bad stuff, and you don't want there to be any bad
You
stuff.
don't, you don't. And
So
there's going to be, because there's going to be, it's like you can't make
right,
everybody happy ideal, but
exactly.
and everybody gets that. That's what I think is kind of cool, is everybody's pretty understanding, most of everybody, but people are generally very understanding these days. So especially working from home, they understand if your dog barks or your kid pops in with her Barbie or something like that. They get it. But at the same time, if they're going through your reviews or they look up a question about where to get a CRM or what, and you're not anywhere on the page, or what is found about you is, well, I worked with them, but their customer service was bad. I was on wait for 30 minutes, and then I got somebody from a different
Right,
country who doesn't actually work for the company and didn't know what was going on. And then I was transferred to so and so, which is deja vu, because haven't we all had that happen? Um,
exactly.
you don't want stuff like that coming up in the search bar. And now it's not just if you're searching the Facebook group. If it's in that Facebook group and that Facebook group is public, then suddenly it's in the Google search engine, or whatever search engine you might use, that it's gonna pop up everywhere. And then because it's
Yep.
popping up there, people are reposting on other places, like, hey, I looked up
Yeah,
this, look what they said. And it pops up on Instagram, and back up on Facebook as a different post. Now it's on Twitter, and now it's on Tumblr, whatever people are, it's different
it's
places.
true. So I think when you can focus, number one, on delivering good service to your customers and making them your priority, and delivering customer service, that's the best thing that you can do in your business. And automation, streamlining, and outsourcing your business is going to help you focus on your customers.
I
And
agree.
that's the long and the short of it.
Focus on your team, focus on your customers, do whatever it takes to get to that point.
Yeah.
Anything morally okay to get to that point, I guess. So yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of things. We've touched on how you help small businesses start up, how they focus. We've touched on the automation throughout the entire thing, and why automation is important, and how technology, or the lack of adoption of it, can impact schools and businesses, to now this idea of outsourcing tasks and processes locally, and keeping that, keeping your efficiency, increasing your team culture, and just really driving your business to success.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, businesses who keep their employees happy are a lot more successful than businesses that don't.
no, I definitely agree. All right. Would you like to add anything as we wrap up right now?
Um, Thank you so much for having me. If you want to reach me, you can head to my website at balaganbegone.com, BALAGANBEGONE, or email me at rebekah@rebekahsaltzman.com, and I spell my name REBEKAH.
Mhm. So
I'm
you
sure
can
everything
also,
will be in the show notes, though.
yeah, yeah. So you can also find Rebekah's name and company in the show notes. And then we're also going to link out to a blog post where you can find everything else that Rebekah would like to share, and all the content of this podcast episode. But for now, this is Everyday Business Solutions, and thank you for tuning in.